From the land-grant University in Urbana-Champaign, Illinois, this is the Closing Market Report. It is the 29th day of September 2025. I'm Extension's Todd Gleason. Coming up, we'll talk about the commodity markets with Curt Kimmel. He's at agmarket.net. We'll hear from Aaron Hager about the changing chemistry classes for weed control. That's right, there's a new class of chemistry that's coming. We haven't heard that one in couple of decades. You'll want to stay with us for that. And then we'll turn our attention to the weather forecast too. We'll talk with Mark Russo from EverStream Analytics on this Monday edition of the Closing Market Report from Illinois Public Media. It is public radio for the farming world, online, on demand at willag.org, willag.org, anytime you'd like to listen.
Todd Gleason services are made available to WILL by University of Illinois Extension.
December corn for the day at $4.21.5, down a half cent. The March at $4.38.5, a quarter lower, and the May contract at $4.47 3/4, down a quarter of a cent. November beans at $10.10.5, 3 1/4 cents lower. The January 10.29 3/4, down 3 1/4. March beans at $10.45.5, down 3 1/2 cents. Bean meal 70 cents lower. The bean oil down 49 cents. Wheat futures for the soft red in the December at $5.19.5, a quarter lower. The hard red up 2 3/4. It finished at $5.08 1/4. Live cattle futures at $233.82.5, down 47.5 cents per 100 pounds. Feeder cattle at $353.87.5, 60 lower, and lean hogs down 70 at $90.35. Crude oil $2.45 lower. It finished at $63.27, or the last trade was. Diesel fuel or heating oil down about 7 cents for the day at $2.34 a gallon, and gasoline at $1.93.5, down a nickel and 3/10 cents. Here to talk about these numbers is Curt Kimmel. He's from agmarket.net out of Normal, Illinois. Hi, Curt. Thanks for being with us. Kind of a quiet day before tomorrow's USDA report, I suppose.
Oh boy, yeah, it's just dead quiet. Most activity is out in the field, of course, with the dry weather forecast and producers eager to keep pushing the harvest activity. It's really quiet. Even market action is relatively quiet. I mean, they've spun a lot of different news, and it's fairly well getting digested into the marketplace. But the big news will be tomorrow's quarterly grain stocks report. We'll have to see what it says, and that's just kind of an unpredictable target to hit. Average trade guess is on corn is 1,337. Average guess on beans is 323 million bushels. The significance of this report, actually, you go back to a year ago, we're about 400 million bushels less, but the price is no better. And on the bean stocks, we're about 20 million bushels less than a year ago. And we're just kind of stuck here at these lower levels. You can debate how to adjust that till you're blue in the face, whether they underestimated last year's crop, whether or not we're seeing crop move to town here that's been in storage for 2 to 3 years in the upper northwest. Also, to the Delta harvest, maybe a little early, but whatever it is, basically, it's basically old news. And the key is to look forward here as we gather some more yield results. Then also, to see if this export business continues to be relatively strong. We saw Mexico come into the marketplace here. They picked up another 135,000 tons of U.S. corn. Then, of course, we sold 100,000 corn to somebody we didn't know.
Okay, so we have all that happening tomorrow. We have also the expectations for this afternoon's USDA report is crop progress is related. I suppose it might show a pretty good move over the last week as farmers really got rolling in the fields. And then if you might talk about what you're hearing, if anything, from Iowa as it's related to the issues that they had or thought they had with Southern Russ at the end of the season.
Yeah, enjoy this afternoon's report. Enjoy tomorrow's report. That's probably the last reports we're going to have for quite some time here if the government shuts down.
That too.
Whether it's good or bad. The sad part is people collecting paycheck or collecting some money. I feel for you. That's tough. They should have had this figured out and not go through the process. But anyway, we're looking at good to excellent category. Just forget that. That's done and over with. Corn harvest as a nation is expected to be about 19% complete as a nation. They're looking anywhere from 15 to 23. Last week we were 11. A year ago at 21. Soybean harvest 19% complete as a nation. Wide range of 12 to 25%. 9% last week and 26% last year. I think we're a little further along than that. If not, we're going to get caught up big time here this week. It seems like everybody's moving here as long as there's just no major breakdowns. As far as yields, continue to be highly variable. There's some expecting yields to be a little softer here as we get into the second part of harvest, but evidently bean yields are surprisingly better than expected. A lot of them are at last year. I mean, you could go 2 miles down the road and see a different story according to whether you receive that moisture or not. But things on beans in the morning, 12-13%. By the afternoon, they're 8-9%. It's pretty well standard procedure clear across the Midwest. On the corn, continue to see disappointing yields on, particularly in Iowa or some of the areas that were really hit with this rust. It just depends whether fungicide was applied or not. It's huge. If no fungicide was applied, then there's a little bit better situation when one pass was applied or else 2 passes. And so the agronomists have gathered, quite a bit of information on this. And so we'll continue to hear reports here as we move forward. But overall, corn yield as a nation, I think most analysts are down to 182, 183. And so there's some ideas this bean yield could be down another bushel yet too, but it's going to take some while to get that all sorted out, Todd.
It'll be interesting to watch as that happens. Anything else before I let you go for the day?
On the hog and pig report, the numbers came in a little less than expected, so we have more demand coming at us here as we start to get into the holiday season. Right now, we're kind of in the doldrums on demand, but we expect demand to pick up as we start moving towards the year end. Overall, feed usage still remains fairly strong. That's an unknown category. But like I said, we can talk some numbers here, but we'll see if we have some more reports here as we move down the road.
Thanks much.
Very good. Take care.
That's Curt Kimmel. He is with agmarket.net. Joins us each and every Monday afternoon here on the Closing Market Report. You can always check him out in the podcast. That's up each day. Just search out the Closing Market Report by name in your favorite podcast applications. The Closing Market Report is a production of Illinois Public Media's public radio for the farming world, online on demand anytime you'd like to listen at willag.org. Our theme music is written, performed, produced, and courtesy of Logan County, Illinois farmer Tim Gleason. Do visit that website. There you'll find daily information from us, including the opening market report, the closing market report, the nutrient loss reduction strategy podcast, and information from the agricultural economist, the crop scientist, as well as the animal scientist, right here on the Urbana-Champaign campus of the U of I. It's all at willag.org, willag.org. Up next, we'll hear from weed scientist Aaron Hager. Weed control remains a problem in farm fields across the Corn Belt, and much of this has to do with the development of resistance to the chemistries now available. Those chemistries have not been updated for a couple of decades. And for a long time, there hasn't been anything on the horizon. I asked Aaron if this continues to be the case.
Pretty much. We'll see one or two new active ingredients coming probably next year, but they'll be new to us, but actually these are fairly old active ingredients from Europe. Diflufenacan is one active ingredient that Bayer Crop Science will bring into the marketplace. The original concept from the company several years ago was to bring it only as a pre-mixed product with one or two different other active ingredients. But apparently that decision now has been changed, and it will be straight diflufenacan. It can be fairly active on the Amaranthus complex, but again, by itself, like so many other examples that we've looked at now for close to 30 years, there's very, very few active ingredients, especially in the pre-emergence marketplace, that'll take us all the way from planting through the post-application timing.
Is this a corn or a soybean herbicide?
It'll actually be both. I don't know, not really for sure what the push will be the first year. It'll be kind of a limited launch, I think, in 26, but more full scale, I'm sure, launch there on more broad acres and starting about 2027.
If you have the ability and you're a producer in the limited launch area, would you decide to make that choice?
Quite frankly, it will be another option for farmers. It's not the only option that they have. Several years ago, we started to take I guess you could call it another look or a fresh look at metribuzin in soybean, simply because that is an active ingredient that allows us to exploit one of the very few weaknesses of the resistance complex that we see in our water hemp populations here in Illinois. And that is the fact that when we see resistance to the photosystem 2 inhibitors or the PS2 inhibitors, that type of resistance is almost always non-target site. So in other words, it's a metabolic type of resistance. And by that we mean the target site remains in a sensitive formation, but yet the plant is actively able to metabolize the herbicides before it causes any sort of detrimental effect. So when you have metabolic triazine resistance, that would render things like atrazine and Princep ineffective, but metribuzin, being an asymmetrical triazine, still remains effective. But many people here, you almost have to have a little bit of gray hair to remember how we used to use metribuzin in soybean here in Illinois back in the 70s and 80s. But what we have found is that it can still be one of the most effective soil residual herbicides that we have now on multiple resistant populations. But just like every other product, we have to make sure that we get the application correct, based on the soil texture for the individual field that we're going to be applying it to.
Based on soil texture?
Soil texture and organic matter, very important. A lot of the most recent use, and by recent use, we'll say within the last 20 to 25 years, would be about 5 ounces or 5 1/3 ounces of a 75 DF equivalent product, and that's simply on the dark prairie soils. It's simply not enough. We need to make sure that we've got those application rates where they need to be. The work that we have done primarily in Champaign County would suggest if we're running something like a 75 DF formulated product, we should be looking at about 8 to 10 ounces on most of the fields. And in our work, that we actually put this on a population resistant to herbicides from 6 different classes. Once we hit that 10-ounce rate at 6 weeks after planting, we were still greater than 90% water hemp control.
Is this what you suggest producers do for next season?
Again, it's another option that we can, the more tactics that we can bring to bear on these populations, the better off in the long run we're going to be, because we really haven't changed the story now for almost 30 years, but we cannot chemically solve this problem that we have with water hemp. It's not going to work. We've gone through an era where, when I started here 32 years ago, some of the ALS inhibitors, things like Pursuit and Classic and Pinnacle, pretty much had the majority of the soybean market, but because resistance evolved primarily in water hemp, we do not see the extensive use of that chemistry. We had to find something else in soybean. That turned into the diphenyl ethers, things like the Flex Stars and the Cobras. We have widespread resistance to that. About the time that was happening, along came 1996, in the first year of the glyphosate or the Roundup Ready technology. And a lot of people looked at the weed science community and said, we don't need you anymore. Glyphosate or Roundup is going to be all that we're going to need. Well, history has shown us again that this species has adapted to that. So we now have, I can remember a time almost 30 years ago when our group published a paper that showed two-way resistance in a water hemp population. And that was just, that was news at the time. Now we're up to 6 in one population. And eventually we'll find 7, and eventually we'll get to 8.
So this fall, when producers are in the combines, what do they need to pay attention to?
Yeah, we always say that the combine is really the last scouting opportunity, weed science scouting opportunity for a growing season. So obviously you know what your program was, and that's your last real look to see, okay, how effective was it? If we see that we've got clean fields, what did we do right? Go back, look at the rates, look at the rainfall application, look at the parameters that you had on your post application. If it worked that well, I wouldn't recommend changing a whole awful lot if you don't have any surviving weeds. If you have surviving weeds, that's a different ball game. Why did they survive? Are we talking about the continued evolution of resistance? Are you talking about something like water hemp, maybe even giant ragweed in northern Illinois that simply emerged after that herbicide had dissipated from the soil? What sort of adjustment do you need to do? Because ultimately, and we've tried to convince this message now for years, the way that you actually win, so to speak, against, an amaranthus population resistant to herbicides from 6 or 7 different classes is not just open up a new jug. That's not going to work indefinitely. The weakness, of course, is the fact the seeds do not remain viable indefinitely in the seed bank. So doing whatever it is that you can do to try to limit seed production, if you can do that for 3 or 4 consecutive years, it's not uncommon to see the water hemp populations in a field dramatically decline very, very quickly. That's how you stay in front of it. That's how you get back in front of it.
Anything we didn't talk about that you think people should know about?
No, I mean, there's always an opportunity, I think, in the fall of the year after you do that scouting operation, if you see things like a lot of winter annual species emerging, if you've got the time to do that, perhaps something like a fall application would be something that could be very beneficial for you, because generally speaking, the winter annuals are always going to be more sensitive in the fall of the year than they are the following spring after they've overwintered and resumed growth.
Aaron Hager is a weed scientist based on the Urbana-Champaign campus of the University of Illinois. I spoke with him during the Farm Progress Show about weed science, particularly as it's related to new chemistries that might be introduced and that farmers could have in their fields sooner rather than later. Let's check the weather forecast for harvest across the Midwest. Just a reminder that if you're out and about on the back roads, even the 2-lane highways, be careful because the equipment is moving. It's big and it's slow, and particularly if you're coming up from the backside of it, you might not realize how fast you're going by comparison to it. It's pretty easy to run into the rear end. They watch for you, but they can't always see you, particularly if they're making a left-hand turn. You have to be careful coming up on them. So be very careful out there, and thank you for paying attention. I know the farmers are paying attention too. It's just one of those things that is difficult at this time of the year. Now let's check the weather forecast, because I know they're going to be moving. And it appears to me, Mark Russo, that the weather is going to be really great for harvest, meaning that there's not a lot of rain, I don't think, in the forecast. Can you tell me about it?
Yeah, absolutely, Todd. Yeah, certainly this totally open weather that we've seen since late last week and anomalously warm temperatures, that's going to continue to be the theme of the pattern, not only this week, but even in next week as well. Now, this week is still like bone dry across much of the Corn Belt. Next week does offer a little bit of increase in rain activity, but it doesn't look heavy or widespread or enough to really bog things down anywhere. And of course, that's all happening after this, again, totally wide open weather here that will be in place for at least the next week.
Okay, and then once we get into the month of October, do things change at all, or do we stay status quo?
Stay status quo as it appears right now, and even into the back half of October, looking some of the preliminary signals point towards a continuation of warmer than normal conditions, generally drier conditions. And the only thing that could change that is if there's a tropical system that moves into the Gulf of Mexico and then potentially up the Mississippi River. There's nothing like that over the next couple of weeks, but that's something to watch down the road potentially that could change things.
Inevitably, if we stay warm and we stay dry, there will be, hey, wait a second, it looks like it could be a drought in 2026 talk start to bubble up. I know better, just because the change of seasons, particularly in the spring, can make such a difference. Can you talk about that for me, please?
Yeah, well, certainly it is going to be something to watch here. And if there is any chatter, some of that could be attributed to the La Nina event across the equatorial Pacific. And, with the current dryness, and La Ninas do tend to produce generally below normal rainfall at times, then that could lead to some low soil moisture going into next growing season. But obviously a long ways off, and winter patterns, even during a La Nina, could still feature an abundance of snow and moisture across portions of the Midwest. So that's definitely going to be something to monitor as we go through the next, numerous months.
Now, La Nina, of course, would have much larger effect, particularly on Argentina, possibly during their growing season. Can you tell me what you see in South America at this time?
Yeah, in terms of any kind of dryness and heat risks with La Nina for Argentina, or for that matter, southern Brazil, that risk is heightened as you get deeper into the growing season, December, especially December, January, and February. So that's something, again, to watch down the road. But in the short term, this early planting period for summer crops in Argentina is really good. Their soil moisture is adequate to abundant. They're generally drier biased over the next 2 weeks with warmer than normal temperatures. It's a favorable pattern here at this early stage of planting.
Hey, thanks much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Todd.
That's Mark Russo. He is with EverStream Analytics. Joined us on this Monday edition of the Closing Market Report from Illinois Public Media. It is public radio for the farming world. Tomorrow at 11 a.m. Central Time, USDA will release the quarterly grain stocks report. I'll be out of the office actually working in the field tomorrow, so I won't have an update of that report during the Closing Market Report, though we will be here for that program. There will be a program. I will be in the field, but not here. Thank you for listening, by the way, and you can always tune in and find all those reports and other information. I should be able to update them on our website at willag.org from the Tractor Cab. Again, that's willag.org. You have a great and a safe afternoon in the field. I'm University of Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason.